My name is Kayla, and at 27, I still flinch when someone raises their hand too quickly. I touch my crooked nose, remembering the day it shattered. My body slammed against the refrigerator, blood pooling on our pristine kitchen floor while my brother Tyler stood over me, fists still clenched. When I reached for the phone to call 911, my own mother snatched it away. The look in her eyes hurt worse than my broken nose. But nothing cut deeper than hearing my father mutter those three familiar words. Drama queen again. Before I tell you how I finally escaped this nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and subscribe if family betrayal stories resonate with you. My earliest memories painted a picture of what seemed like the perfect American family. We lived in a charming two-story colonial in suburban Philadelphia, with a well-maintained lawn and a basketball hoop in the driveway. From the outside, we looked like a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. My father, Jeff, owned a successful construction company and worked long hours to provide us with a comfortable life. He was tall, commanding, and his approval was something I desperately craved but rarely received. My mother, Diana, maintained our home with military precision, her perfectly manicured nails and immaculate appearance hiding the vodka bottles I would later find stashed throughout the house. Then there was Tyler, my brother, 4 years older and seemingly born with a golden halo. In those early years, when I was 5 and he was 9, he would sometimes protect me from neighborhood bullies or share his dessert when I dropped mine. I remember clinging to his hand on my first day of kindergarten, his presence making me feel safe. Those moments grew increasingly rare as we got older. The cracks in our family foundation were hairline at first, easy to overlook or dismiss. I remember being 7, walking into the kitchen late at night for a glass of water, and finding my mother slumped at the table, an empty wine bottle beside her. When she noticed me, she straightened up instantly, her smile tight as she ushered me back to bed, whispering that this was just mommy having a little relaxation time. I learned not to mention these moments to anyone. By the time I was 10, our family dynamic had solidified into clearly defined roles that would haunt me for years to come. Tyler had become the golden child, the son who could do no wrong in my father's eyes. He excelled at baseball and football, bringing home trophies that my father proudly displayed in a special cabinet in our living room. My academic achievements, my perfect report cards and writing contest awards, were acknowledged with distracted nods and quickly forgotten. Our family dinners became a stage for Tyler's accomplishments. My father would ask him detailed questions about his game or practice, leaning forward with genuine interest. "How did you handle that curveball, son? Show me your grip." When my turn came, if it came at all, questions were perfunctory. School good. Even when I excitedly shared news about placing first in the science fair, the conversation would swiftly return to Tyler. The clearest memory I have of this uneven treatment came when I was 12. After months of preparation, I won the regional spelling bee, beating students 2 grades above me. My teacher called my parents personally to tell them how exceptional my performance had been. The competition was on a Saturday afternoon, the same day as one of Tyler's baseball games. I stood on that stage, scanning the audience after spelling quintessential correctly for the win, searching for my parents' faces. They never showed. That evening, they returned home celebrating Tyler's home run, completely forgetting my competition had even happened. When I reminded them, my mother's face fell for just a second before saying, "Oh, honey, that completely slipped our mind. But good job. Is there a certificate or something we can put on the fridge?" It was around this time I first noticed Tyler's temper. He would snap over small things, throwing controllers when he lost at video games or punching walls when frustrated. My parents excused it as boys will be boys and just his competitive nature. The first time his anger turned toward me was when I changed the TV channel while he was in the bathroom. He returned, saw his show was no longer on, and threw the remote at my head, missing by inches. When I told my parents, my mother sighed and said, "You know how he gets. Why would you change his show?" The betrayals grew more significant as I entered my teenage years. When I was 14, I spent weeks working on a science project. a complex model of the solar system with detailed research on each planet. I left it in the garage to dry overnight, and the next morning found it completely destroyed. Tyler claimed he had accidentally knocked it over while getting his bike, but the damage looked deliberate, planets crushed and ripped apart. My parents refused to believe he would do such a thing intentionally. "You shouldn't have left it where it could get damaged," my father said dismissively. "And you have 3 more days to redo it. Stop being so dramatic." That phrase would become a recurring theme in our house. Anytime I expressed hurt, disappointment, or pointed out unfair treatment, the response was predictable. "Stop being dramatic, Kayla." It became so common that I started doubting my own feelings, wondering if I truly was oversensitive as they claimed. Meanwhile, my mother's drinking worsened, especially after my grandmother passed away. She maintained a functioning alcoholic facade during the day, but evenings revealed the truth. I learned to recognize the slight slur in her speech, the glassy look in her eyes, and knew to make myself scarce. My father responded to her drinking by staying at work later, sometimes not returning until I was already in bed. On weekends, he'd retreat to his workshop or golf course, leaving Tyler and me alone with our increasingly unpredictable mother. By 14, I had learned the family code of silence. We never discussed Mom's drinking, Dad's absence, or Tyler's preferential treatment outside our house. We never called the police when arguments turned violent, like when Dad threw a plate against the wall during a fight with Mom. We presented a united, perfect front to the world, while inside our home, I was slowly disappearing, becoming a ghost in my own life. High school should have been my escape, but instead, it became another arena where I lived in Tyler's shadow. He was a senior when I was a freshman, captain of the football team, popular and charismatic in ways I never managed to be. Teachers would often say, "Oh, you're Tyler Martin's sister," their tone revealing their expectations. Some were disappointed when I didn't share his athletic abilities, while others seemed relieved I was quieter and less disruptive. I found my sanctuary in the art room, spending lunch periods and free time there instead of navigating the complicated social landscape of the cafeteria. Mrs. Wilson, the art teacher, recognized something in my work. The emotions I couldn't express aloud somehow finding their way onto canvas and paper. "Your use of shadow is remarkable, Kayla," she told me once. "There's so much depth here." It was one of the few times an adult had really seen me. My only true friend was Amelia, a transfer student who knew nothing about Tyler or my family's reputation. With her short purple hair and constellation of freckles, she existed comfortably outside the social hierarchy, pulling me into her orbit of vintage clothing shops and obscure coffee houses where we would talk about books and art for hours. With Amelia, I could briefly forget the tension waiting for me at home. That tension had escalated after my grandmother died when I was 15. My mother's drinking, once confined to evenings, began earlier in the day. She would pick me up from school with a travel mug that I knew contained more vodka than coffee. Once, she nearly hit a crossing guard, swerving at the last minute and laughing it off as these new brakes being so sensitive. My father retreated further into his work as the construction company faced challenges from larger competitors. He would come home with a permanent furrow between his brows, disappearing into his office with tumbler of whiskey, emerging only to praise Tyler's latest accomplishment or criticize whatever minor infraction I had committed, like leaving a light on or using too much hot water. The school counselor, Mrs. Brennan, called me in once after noticing I had grown increasingly withdrawn. "Is everything okay at home, Kayla?" she asked gently. The question hung in the air, and for a brief moment, I considered telling her everything. The drinking, the favoritism, the growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. But then I remembered my father's warnings about family business staying within our 4 walls. "Everything's fine," I replied with the practiced smile I had perfected. "Just stressed about college applications." The first truly violent incident happened when I was 16. Tyler had just turned 20 and was home from his first year of college, where he was already struggling academically but excelling at parties. I had borrowed his charger after asking permission earlier that day, but he'd apparently forgot. When he couldn't find it, he stormed into my room without knocking. "Where's my charger?" he demanded, ripping my headphones off my head. "You said I could borrow it," I reminded him, pointing to where it was plugged in beside my bed. "I was going to return it when I finished." His face contorted with rage so sudden, and complete it made my blood run cold. "You never asked me. You're always taking my stuff without asking." Before I could respond, he grabbed the charger with such force that my phone flew off the bedside table, then slammed my bedroom door so hard the frame cracked. I heard him stomping down the hall, and then another crash as he punched the bathroom door. When my parents returned from their dinner out, I tried to explain what happened. My mother immediately went to check on Tyler, while my father surveyed the damage to my door frame with annoyance. "Did you provoke him?" he asked, not looking at me. "No, I had permission to use the charger. He just forgot." My father sighed, rubbing his temples. "You know how important his studies are right now. He's under a lot of pressure, with finals coming up. Why create more problems for him?" The message was clear. Tyler's needs, comfort, and even his inaccurate version of events would always take precedence over mine. The next week, my father bought Tyler a used Jeep Cherokee as an early birthday present, despite the door incident and Tyler's recent DUI that had been settled quietly with the help of my father's friend in the police department. The Jeep cost more than what had been initially promised for my college fund. When I pointed this out, my mother snapped, "College is still 2 years away for you. We'll figure it out then." Desperate for an ally, I tried talking to my Aunt Jessica, my mother's sister, during a rare visit. We were alone in the kitchen, and I carefully brought up how difficult things had been at home. "Your mother has always been high-strung," Aunt Jessica said dismissively. "And all teenagers think their parents are unfair. Trust me, you'll appreciate them when you're older and see how much they've sacrificed for you." I retreated further into myself after that, perfecting the art of invisibility. I excelled at school not for recognition, but because good grades might be my only ticket out. I stopped bringing friends home, stopped sharing anything significant about my life with my parents, stopped expecting fairness or support. I became a ghost, haunting the periphery of my own home. The summer before my senior year marked a crucial turning point. Tyler, now 21, was caught driving drunk again, this time hitting a parked car. No one was hurt, but the potential consequences were serious given his previous record. My father spent thousands on a good lawyer and pulled every string he had to keep Tyler out of serious trouble. The financial strain was evident. Hushed arguments about money became a nightly occurrence. Then came the blow I should have anticipated, but still left me reeling. One night, I overheard my parents arguing about finances. "We need that money now, Diana. The lawyer wants another $5,000 by Friday." "But that's Kayla's college fund," my mother protested weakly. "We promised her." "It's our money," my father countered, "and Tyler needs it more right now. His entire future is at stake. Kayla can get student loans or scholarships. She's always going on about how smart she is." The next morning, I confronted them at breakfast, something I rarely had the courage to do. "I heard you last night. You're taking my college money for Tyler's legal fees." My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. "We're borrowing some of it. You'll get it back. Like the money you borrowed last year for his car. Or the money before that for his tuition when he failed those classes." That made him look up, his eyes narrowing. "Watch your tone, young lady. I've worked so hard, maintained a 4-point GPA, joined every club and activity that looks good on applications, all so I could get into a good school. You promised that fund was for my education." My mother, already nursing her morning coffee laced with vodka, intervened. "Kayla, please. Your brother is in real trouble. This is what families do, they help each other." When has this family ever helped me? The words burst out before I could stop them. My father stood then, towering over me. "You're lucky we even remember to feed you, with all the problems your brother has created. At least he has the decency to apologize when he messes up. All you do is complain and judge us." I left for school that day with the cold certainty that I would have to save myself, because no one in that house ever would. My senior year of high school became my covert escape planning phase. I applied to colleges my parents knew about, state schools within driving distance that they would find acceptable. But secretly, I applied to schools across the country, seeking maximum distance between myself and the toxicity of home. I found a job at Horizon Books, a small independent bookstore in town owned by Mrs. Peterson, a kind-eyed woman in her 60s who quickly became the mother figure I desperately needed. She noticed my work ethic and soon entrusted me with more responsibilities, from ordering stock to helping coordinate author events. "You have good instincts, Kayla," she would tell me. "And a sharp mind. You're going places, mark my words." On slow afternoons, I would confide small pieces of my home situation to her. Never the full picture, but enough that she understood my desperation to leave. She increased my hours whenever possible and taught me about financial independence, helping me open a bank account my parents couldn't access. "Always have your own money," she advised. "It's the first step to freedom." When my acceptance letters started arriving, I had them sent to the bookstore. My heart soared when I opened the thick envelope from UCLA, offering me a substantial merit scholarship. It wouldn't cover everything, but combined with my savings and potential work-study opportunities, it made my dream of California sunshine and 3,000 miles of distance seem possible. I kept these letters in a locked box beneath the floorboards in my closet, along with my private bank book and the brochures I collected about student housing and financial aid. Each night, I would take them out, running my fingers over the emblems of universities that represented my ticket to freedom. Graduation day should have been triumphant. I was valedictorian, a fact that barely registered with my parents until the principal called to confirm I would be giving a speech. My mother seemed more concerned about what she would wear than about my achievement. "The Richardsons will be there, and you know Carol always notices everything," she fretted, rifling through her closet. "Do you think the blue dress makes me look too pale?" My father was focused on Tyler, who was being awarded a sports scholarship to a Division II school after barely maintaining the required GPA at community college. "Make sure you mention your brother in your speech," he instructed me. "It would look odd if you didn't acknowledge his accomplishment too." Standing at the podium on graduation day, looking out at the sea of faces, I went off script for just a moment. Success isn't just about the recognition we receive, but about the quiet determination to excel even when no one is watching. My eyes found Mrs. Peterson in the audience, who gave me a subtle nod of understanding. My brief moment of triumph collapsed 2 weeks later when I sat my parents down to discuss college plans. I had prepared a detailed presentation about UCLA, the scholarship, my savings, and the estimated costs. "California," my father interrupted halfway through. "Absolutely not. That's completely unreasonable. But I have a scholarship, and I've saved almost $7,000 from working at the bookstore." "That's not nearly enough," my mother said, her words slightly slurred even though it was only 4 in the afternoon. "And we can't help you right now. Tyler's situation has strained our finances." "You promised," I said quietly. "All through high school, you said if I got good grades and scholarships, I could go to any college I wanted." "We meant any reasonable college," my father countered. "State university is perfectly fine, and you can live at home to save money. Your brother needs our support right now. His new coach expects big things, and we need to make sure he has everything he needs to succeed." The crushing realization that I would remain trapped sent me spiraling into my first serious bout of depression. I enrolled at Westfield Community College, continuing to work at the bookstore, now full-time during summers and 20 hours a week during the school year. My art, once vibrant and expressive, became muted and mechanical. Mrs. Peterson noticed the change. "Don't give up, Kayla," she urged one day. "This is a setback, not the end. Keep saving, keep planning. Sometimes the longer road makes us stronger." I clung to her words during that dark first year of community college, working toward an associate degree while continuing to save every penny I could. I added a weekend job waiting tables at a local diner, coming home exhausted but with pockets full of tips that went straight into my secret account. Meanwhile, the situation at home deteriorated further. Tyler had dropped out of college after one semester, losing his scholarship and returning home with a chip on his shoulder and no plans for the future. He took a series of jobs, but never lasted more than a few months at any of them. My father's construction business was struggling in the economic downturn, adding financial stress to the already volatile household. My mother's drinking escalated to frightening levels. I found her passed out in the bathroom more than once, and the vodka bottles were no longer hidden but kept in plain sight. My father worked later and later, sometimes not coming home at all, claiming he was staying near job sites to get early starts. Tyler's verbal abuse toward me increased in frequency and intensity. He resented my continued academic success and what he perceived as judgment from me, though I rarely spoke to him at all anymore. "Think you're so much better than everyone, don't you?" he would sneer when passing me in the hallway. "Little Miss Perfect with her books and her art. Nobody cares about that crap in the real world." My parents never intervened. If anything, they enabled his behavior, making excuses or suggesting I was somehow provoking him by my very existence. The walking on eggshells atmosphere became so normal that I sometimes forgot other families lived differently. By 20, I had completed my associate degree with perfect grades and was 1 year into my bachelor's program at State University, still living at home and working both jobs. The routine was grueling. Classes in the morning, bookstore in the afternoon, diner on weekends, studying late into the night. I existed on coffee and determination, my goal always in sight. Escape. At 21, I was finally getting close to my goal. 3 more semesters until graduation. My savings had grown to almost $20,000, enough for a security deposit and several months' rent once I finished school. I had secretly applied for graphic design internships in Chicago, Boston, and Seattle, determined to put as many miles as possible between myself and Philadelphia. I had even found a potential apartment with a roommate, Rachel, a quiet nursing student I had befriended in an elective course. We made plans to move in together after graduation, her practical nature complementing my creative one. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel hopeful. Tyler, now 25, had cycled through 6 jobs in 4 years. His latest firing from a warehouse position had sent him into a particularly dark mood that permeated our entire house. He spent his days sleeping and his nights drinking with friends, returning home in the early hours to crash loudly through the house. My father's business had partially recovered, but the years of financial strain had taken their toll. His hair had grayed prematurely, and the lines around his eyes had deepened into permanent furrows. He grew increasingly obsessed with Tyler's lack of direction, alternating between enabling him financially and berating him for his failures. "You need to talk to your brother," he told me one evening. "He might listen to you." The suggestion was so absurd I almost laughed. He hasn't listened to me once in 21 years. What makes you think he would start now? You're good with words. And you've always been the responsible one. He didn't seem to register the irony of acknowledging this fact while continuing to focus all his parental energy on Tyler. My mother's health had begun to show the effects of years of heavy drinking. Her once carefully maintained appearance had slipped. Her hands trembled in the mornings, and yellow had crept into the whites of her eyes. Still, no one in our house acknowledged her alcoholism directly. It remained the elephant in the room we all navigated around. The week before the incident that would finally break me free began with unusual tension, even for our household. My father had pressured me to contribute more financially to the household expenses, suggesting that since I was working 2 jobs, I could afford to pay rent. "I need to save for after graduation," I explained. "I have plans." "Plans can wait," he countered. "Family comes first. Your mother and I have supported you for years." The selective memory of my parents never ceased to amaze me. The college fund they had promised and then diverted to Tyler's legal fees, the countless times they had chosen his needs over mine, all erased in their revisionist family history. 3 days before the incident, I had made the mistake of leaving my apartment application visible on my laptop when I went to shower. I returned to find my mother scrolling through it, her face pinched with anger. "Moving to Chicago," she demanded. "Were you even going to tell us?" After it was finalized, yes. I kept my voice calm, though my heart raced. "I've been applying for jobs there. What about your father and me? And Tyler? He needs support right now. Tyler is 25 years old. He doesn't need me to support him." She deleted the application with a vicious click. Family stays together during hard times. You've always been selfish, Kayla. I didn't bother telling her I had already submitted the application and received confirmation. Let her think she had won that small battle. The night of the incident started like many others. I returned home from my shift at the diner around 10:30, exhausted and hoping to shower and sleep. The house was quiet, my father not yet home from work and my mother presumably asleep. As I passed the living room, I noticed Tyler sprawled on the couch, surrounded by empty beer cans. I moved quietly, not wanting to wake him, but as I reached the stairs, he stirred. "Where have you been?" he slurred. "Work," I answered simply, continuing up the stairs. "Wait," he struggled to his feet. "Need to talk to you." Something in his tone made me pause. "What is it?" "Someone called the cops on me last night. Said I was driving erratically." His eyes narrowed accusingly. "You're the only one who would do that. I was working last night. I had no idea where you were or what you were doing." I turned to continue up the stairs. He followed me, his footsteps heavy and uncoordinated. "Don't lie to me. You've always been jealous, always trying to make me look bad." I ignored him, walking toward my room, but he grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. "I'm talking to you." I pulled away. "I'm going to bed, Tyler. We can talk when you're sober." What happened next played out in terrible slow motion. His face contorted with rage, and he lunged forward, shoving me with both hands. I stumbled backward, losing my balance at the top of the stairs. Only a desperate grab at the railing saved me from falling down the entire flight. The noise roused my mother, who emerged from her room in a bathrobe, eyes unfocused. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Nothing," I said quickly, heart pounding. "Tyler's drunk. I'm going to bed." "She called the cops on me," Tyler insisted, swaying slightly. "After everything this family has done for her." My mother's bleary gaze moved between us. "Is that true, Kayla?" "Of course not. I was at work all night." "Always lying," Tyler muttered. "Little Miss Perfect never does anything wrong." I should have walked away then, locked myself in my room and waited for morning. But years of suppressed anger suddenly surfaced. "You know what, Tyler? Maybe someone did call the cops on you because you were driving drunk. Again. And maybe you should take responsibility for once in your life, instead of blaming everyone else for your problems." His face went completely still, a terrible calm before the storm. "You think you're better than me." "I think I'm not throwing my life away," I shot back. "I think I'm not making our parents clean up my messes year after year." He moved with unexpected speed for someone so intoxicated. One moment I was standing at my bedroom door, the next I was being dragged down the stairs by my hair, my mother's ineffectual cries of "Tyler, stop," following us. The fight moved to the kitchen, where I broke free and put the center island between us. "Get away from me," I warned, reaching for my phone in my back pocket. "Or what?" he taunted, circling the island. "You'll call the police." "Go ahead. See if anyone believes you." I pulled out my phone, and something in my determination must have registered through his drunken haze. He lunged across the island, grabbing for my wrist. I backed away, but he rounded the counter with frightening speed and shoved me hard. My body hit the refrigerator with bone-jarring force, my head snapping back against the metal door. Pain exploded across my face, hot and shocking, as I felt my nose give way with a sickening crunch. Warm blood poured down my face, splashing onto the white tile floor. The metallic taste filled my mouth as I struggled to stay upright, one hand reaching for the counter to steady myself. "Oh my God," my mother gasped from the doorway, finally seeming to realize the severity of the situation. Tyler stood frozen, looking at the blood with widening eyes, the reality of what he'd done seemingly penetrating his drunken haze. I raised my phone with trembling hands, barely able to see through the tears and blood. "I'm calling 911. What happened next would define my relationship with my family forever. As I struggled to dial, my mother crossed the room with surprising speed and snatched the phone from my hands. "No police," she hissed, her alcohol breath hot on my face. "Get over it. It was an accident." I stared at her in disbelief, blood still streaming from my nose. "He broke my nose." "You provoked him," she insisted, pocketing my phone. "You know how he gets when he drinks." The front door opened, and my father's heavy footsteps approached the kitchen. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Me bleeding against the refrigerator, Tyler standing in stunned silence, my mother blocking my path. "What the hell happened?" he demanded. "Tyler and Kayla had a fight," my mother explained quickly. "Things got out of hand." My father's eyes settled on me, taking in my clearly broken nose, the blood soaking the front of my shirt. For one brief moment, I thought I saw concern, maybe even the protective instinct that should have been there all along. Then his expression hardened. "Drama queen again," he muttered, shaking his head as he walked past me to the liquor cabinet. "Clean up this mess before it stains." In that moment, something broke inside me far more permanently than my nose. The last thread of hope that my parents might someday protect me, choose me, love me as they should, snapped completely. I stood there, bleeding and invisible, as my father poured himself a whiskey and my mother led Tyler to the living room sofa, murmuring comforting words to him as if he were the victim. I made my way upstairs alone, locking myself in the bathroom to assess the damage. My nose sat at an unnatural angle, already swelling and turning purple. I cleaned the blood as best I could, stuffed tissues into my nostrils, and found some ancient pain relievers in the medicine cabinet. Looking at my reflection, eyes swollen from crying, blood still smeared across my face despite my efforts to clean it, I made a silent vow. This would be the last time they hurt me. I would get out or die trying. The morning after Tyler broke my nose, I called in sick to both jobs, sending emails from my laptop since my mother had not returned my phone. I waited until everyone had left the house, my father to work, my mother on errands, and Tyler still passed out on the couch. With shaking hands, I took photos of my injuries, the bruising now spread across my face in violent purples and yellows. I documented the blood stains on my clothing and the kitchen floor that no one had bothered to clean up properly. At the bookstore the next day, Mrs. Peterson gasped when she saw my face despite my attempts to cover the worst of the bruising with makeup. "Kayla, what happened?" The concern in her eyes made my throat tight. "I fell," I lied automatically, the family code of silence deeply ingrained. She looked at me for a long moment, then gently closed the office door. "You can use my computer for whatever you need today. Take your time." I spent my lunch break researching domestic violence resources, my hands trembling as I typed. The websites described dynamics, so familiar they could have been written about my family. The golden child and scapegoat roles, the enabling parent, the family secret keeper. One passage in particular stood out. Abuse victims often believe they deserve the treatment they receive or that their situation isn't bad enough to warrant intervention. I had told myself for years that because Tyler wasn't beating me daily, because my parents weren't leaving visible bruises, what happened in our house wasn't really abuse. The websites told a different story. I created a new email account that couldn't be traced to me and reached out to a domestic violence advocate named Lauren. Her response was prompt and kind, offering resources and support without pressure. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop far from my usual haunts. That evening, Tyler attempted what passed for an apology in our dysfunctional household. "Look, I was wasted," he said, hovering in my doorway. "I didn't mean to hit you that hard." Not, "I didn't mean to hit you at all, but that hard." The distinction spoke volumes. "It's fine," I replied, not looking up from my textbook. "Just forget it." He seemed relieved by my apparent forgiveness, but as he turned to leave, he added casually, By the way, if anyone asks about your face, we're saying you walked into a door, right? Don't need people getting the wrong idea. The threat was subtle but clear. Keep our family secrets or face consequences. My mother reinforced this message the next day, cornering me in the kitchen before I left for class. Your father and I have been talking. We think it would be best if you didn't discuss family matters with outsiders. People misunderstand these situations. What situation? I asked, my tone deliberately innocent. I thought I just walked into a door. She flinched slightly at my sarcasm, but pressed on. You know how important your father's reputation is for his business. And Tyler is trying to get his life together. He has a job interview next week. Don't worry, I assured her with false sweetness. Family business stays in the family. You've taught me that lesson very well. Behind my compliant facade, I was making connections that would become my lifeline. I reconnected with Amelia, my high school friend, who had returned from college on the West Coast. Over coffee, I revealed small pieces of my home situation, testing the waters. I always sensed something was off, she admitted. You never wanted me to come over, and you got so tense whenever your family called. It's worse than you imagine, I told her. And I need to get out. Her response was immediate and unhesitating. My apartment has a sofa bed. It's yours whenever you need it. At the bookstore, I confided in Jackson, a coworker in his 30s who had become something of a big brother figure. He had escaped his own troubled home at 18 and understood the particular challenges of breaking away from toxic family dynamics. The hardest part is overcoming the guilt, he told me. They've programmed you to feel responsible for them, but you're not. Your only responsibility is to yourself. My meeting with Lauren, the domestic violence advocate, provided practical guidance that my emotion-clouded mind desperately needed. We met in a quiet corner of a coffee shop 20 minutes from my neighborhood. What happened to your nose? She asked directly after introducing herself. My brother pushed me into a refrigerator during an argument. My mother took my phone when I tried to call 911. My father called me a drama queen. Saying the words aloud to a stranger made them sound as horrific as they truly were. Lauren didn't seem shocked, though, just nodded and took notes. First, she said, you need medical documentation. Even if it's healing already, a doctor can confirm it was broken and record the injury. My parents would see the insurance claim, I pointed out. There are clinics that work with domestic violence victims. I can connect you with one, she slid a card across the table. Second, you need a safe exit plan. This isn't about just moving out. When abusers, especially family members, sense they're losing control, the situation often escalates. We spent the next hour outlining a detailed escape plan. What documents I needed to secure, how to move my belongings out safely, legal options for protection if needed, and most importantly, how to prepare emotionally for the inevitable backlash. The next week, I visited a clinic Lauren recommended, where a doctor confirmed my nose had indeed been broken and hadn't been set properly. It started healing this way, he explained, pointing to the X-ray. To fix it completely now would require rebreaking it. I declined that procedure for the moment, but asked him to document everything thoroughly. I may need this documentation later, I explained. He seemed to understand, adding detailed notes to my file about the injury being consistent with significant impact trauma, rather than a fall or walking into an object. With each small step, my resolve strengthened. I began moving important documents, irreplaceable photographs, and cherished possessions to a small storage unit I rented under only my name. Each item I removed from my childhood home felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The hardest part was confronting my own fear. Not just fear of Tyler's violence or my parents' rejection, but the deeper fear of being truly alone in the world. For all the dysfunction in my family, they were familiar. The unknown future loomed both liberating and terrifying. 1 month after the nose-breaking incident, I sat alone in my car after work, contemplating the choice before me. Stay and continue the cycle of abuse, hoping someday my family would change, or leave and build a life without them. As I sat there, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Your mother and I need to talk to you about your financial contributions to the household. Be home by 7. Later that evening, I overheard a conversation that solidified my decision. I had returned home quietly, earlier than expected, and paused outside my father's office when I heard my name. "Kayla's getting too independent," my father was saying. "That bookstore job gives her too much freedom. I've been thinking about calling her manager, maybe mentioning some concerns about her reliability." "What would that accomplish?" my mother asked. "She'd have less money, less options. She needs to understand her place is here, helping the family. Tyler needs our support right now, and she needs to do her part." The calculated cruelty of it, the deliberate plan to sabotage the career I had worked so hard to build, struck me like a physical blow. Any lingering doubt about my decision vanished. I would not spend one day more than necessary under their roof. I chose a Tuesday for my escape, knowing my father would be at a job site across town, my mother at her weekly hair appointment, and Tyler usually sleeping until afternoon. The timing had to be perfect. I needed the 30-minute window when the house would be empty. Jackson arrived with his truck at exactly 9:15, pulling up quietly in front of the house. Amelia came in her car as backup. We had planned everything meticulously, right down to which items would go in which vehicle. "You okay?" Jackson asked as I met them on the sidewalk, hands shaking despite my determination. "Let's just do this," I replied, leading them inside. We moved with practiced efficiency, having rehearsed the plan multiple times. The remaining clothes went into garbage bags, my art supplies into plastic tubs, my small desk dismantled and loaded last. Jackson handled the heavy lifting, while Amelia and I focused on smaller items, working in near silence with the intensity of people executing a heist. 25 minutes later, the last box was loaded. I stood in my childhood bedroom, now stripped of anything that marked it as mine. The bare walls and empty closet should have made me sad, but instead, I felt a strange lightness. I placed an envelope on the stripped bed, containing a brief note. "I am safe. I am not coming back. Please don't try to find me." I didn't include my new address or any details about my plans. The letter was a courtesy, not an invitation for continued contact. As we pulled away from the house, I didn't look back. The neighborhood where I had grown up shrank in the rearview mirror, and with each mile, the tightness in my chest eased slightly. We drove directly to a small apartment Amelia had helped me find, in a secure building across town where I could stay temporarily while finalizing arrangements for the Chicago move. Jackson and Amelia helped me unload and set up the basics, making sure I had a functioning bed, kitchen supplies, and bathroom necessities before reluctantly leaving me alone in my new space. The silence was unfamiliar and absolute. For the first time in my memory, I wasn't listening for footsteps in the hall, angry voices from downstairs, or the telltale sound of bottles clinking in the kitchen. The text started around 3 in the afternoon, when my mother presumably returned home and found my room empty. They began with confusion, quickly escalating to anger. "Where are you? Call home immediately. Your father is furious. You need to explain yourself. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Tyler is worried sick. We all are." I didn't respond to any of them, silencing my phone and focusing on organizing my new space. The voicemails were harder to ignore, my mother's voice alternating between tearful pleas and cold accusations, my father's gruff demands for my immediate return. Tyler left only one message, slurred and rambling, vacillating between apology and blame. I held firm for 3 days, going to work, coming straight back to my apartment, speaking only to Amelia, Jackson, and Mrs. Peterson. On the 4th day, Tyler showed up at the bookstore. I was shelving new arrivals when I heard the bell above the door. Looking up, I froze at the sight of my brother, his face set in an expression I knew too well, the barely contained rage simmering just below the surface. "We need to talk," he announced loudly, causing several customers to look up from their browsing. "I'm working," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "And this isn't the place." "Then where is the place?" Your new apartment that you didn't tell any of us about." He stepped closer, his voice rising. "Mom's a wreck. Dad can't focus on work. All because you had to be dramatic about a little family disagreement." Mrs. Peterson emerged from the back office, alerted by the commotion. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her normally kind eyes hard as she assessed Tyler. "Family matter," Tyler replied dismissively, not looking at her. "Nothing for you to worry about. Kayla works for me, and this is my store," Mrs. Peterson said firmly. "If you're disturbing my employees and customers, it absolutely is my concern." Tyler's face darkened. "You don't know anything about our family." "I know Kayla is an exceptional young woman who deserves respect," she countered. "And I know that if you don't leave my store immediately, I'll be calling the police." The word police seemed to penetrate Tyler's anger. His eyes darted around, noting the customers watching the scene unfold. With a final glare at me, he backed toward the door. "This isn't over," he warned before storming out. That evening, I filed for a temporary restraining order, using the medical documentation of my broken nose and the incident at the bookstore as evidence. The process was intimidating, the courthouse form intimidating, but Lauren, the advocate, walked me through each step. 2 days later, it was granted. Tyler had to stay at least 100 yards away from me, my workplace, and my residence. The restraining order enraged my parents, who left increasingly hostile messages accusing me of tearing the family apart, of exaggerating the situation for attention, of betraying family loyalty. I blocked their numbers after a week, unable to bear the constant barrage. I thought I had finally achieved separation, but I underestimated their determination. 3 weeks after my escape, I returned home from work to find my parents' car parked outside my apartment building. They had somehow tracked down my address, perhaps through a family friend or by following me from work. My mother spotted me first, rushing over as I approached the building entrance. "Kayla, please," she began, her eyes red from crying. "This has gone on long enough. Come home and we can work this out as a family." My father stood a few paces behind her, his expression a mixture of anger and what might have been confusion, as if he genuinely couldn't understand why I had left. "I'm not coming back," I said firmly. "Please respect my decision." "You've always been stubborn," my father interjected, stepping forward. "But this is ridiculous. Filing legal papers against your own brother. What will people think?" "I don't care what people think anymore," I replied, reaching for my keys. "Tyler broke my nose, and you both protected him instead of me. That tells me everything I need to know about where I stand in this family." "It was an accident," my mother insisted. "He was drunk, he didn't mean it. And that makes it okay. He's 25 years old, Mom. Being drunk isn't an excuse." My father's face hardened. "So you're just going to abandon your family when things get tough? That's not how we raised you." Something in me snapped. Years of suppressed anger and hurt surged to the surface. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, switching on the voice recorder app. "Let me be very clear," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm protecting myself from people who have consistently shown they don't value my safety or well-being. Tyler has been violent toward me for years, and you've enabled him every step of the way." "That's not true," my father protested, noticing the phone in my hand. "What are you doing?" "Creating evidence," I replied. "Since you both seem to have selective memory about what happens in our family." "Turn that off," he demanded, reaching for the phone. I stepped back, keeping it out of reach. "No. For once, you're going to listen to me. Tyler broke my nose. I was bleeding on the kitchen floor, and Mom took my phone so I couldn't call for help. You called me a drama queen. Those are facts, not my interpretation. If either of you had shown an ounce of remorse or concern, maybe things could be different." My mother was crying now, mascara streaking down her face. "We love you, Kayla. We've always loved you." "Love doesn't hurt people," I replied softly. "Love doesn't make excuses for violence. Love protects." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Tyler, who came barreling around the corner of the building. His face was flushed with anger, his movements erratic in a way that suggested he'd been drinking again. "Found you," he slurred, pointing an unsteady finger at me. "Think you can hide from your own family?" "Tyler, stop," my mother pleaded. "We were just talking." But Tyler was beyond reason, advancing toward me with clenched fists. "You made me look like a criminal with that restraining order. My boss saw it. Do you know what that did to me?" "You need to leave," I said, backing toward the building entrance where other residents might hear. "All of you. I have a restraining order against Tyler, and I'll call the police if you don't go right now." "You ungrateful little," Tyler lunged forward, only to be restrained by my father. "Not here," my father hissed. "There are people watching." Indeed, several of my neighbors had emerged from the building, drawn by the raised voices. One, an older man I recognized from the first floor, called out, "Everything okay over there?" "Should I call the police?" "Yes, please," I called back, seizing the opportunity. "And tell them there's a violation of a restraining order." The mention of police again shifted the dynamic. My father's grip on Tyler tightened, and he began pulling him toward their car. "We're leaving," he announced. This was a mistake. My mother hesitated, looking between them and me. "Kayla, please." "Go, Mom," I said gently. "Get help for your drinking. Get help for all of you. I can't be part of this anymore." As they drove away, Tyler shouting obscenities from the passenger seat, I felt a strange sense of calm. The confrontation I had dreaded for weeks had happened, and I was still standing. More importantly, I had spoken my truth without flinching, without minimizing, without the automatic family reflex to protect the abuser at the expense of the victim. The police arrived 10 minutes later, taking my statement and confirming the restraining order was in effect. When they asked if I wanted to press charges for the violation, I hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Yes. It has to stop somewhere." The subsequent legal proceedings were draining but necessary. Tyler was charged with violating the restraining order, and the audio I had recorded provided additional evidence of his threatening behavior. He received a stern warning from the judge and was ordered to attend anger management classes. More importantly, the experience seemed to finally make my parents realize I was serious about maintaining boundaries. The harassment slowed, then stopped entirely. I had won my freedom, not through running away in the night as I had initially planned, but by standing my ground and refusing to participate in the family dysfunction any longer. The victory felt bittersweet, tainted by the knowledge that it had cost me the family I had always wished for but never truly had. The first 6 months of true independence were both liberating and terrifying. Without the constant stress of navigating my family's dysfunction, I discovered depths of exhaustion I hadn't even been aware of carrying. Some days I would come home from work and simply sit in silence, marveling at the peace, at the absence of walking on eggshells. Therapy became my lifeline during this period. Through Lauren, I found Dr. Warner, a trauma specialist who helped me unpack the years of emotional and physical abuse I had normalized. In our first session, I minimized my experiences, still clinging to the family narrative that I was overreacting. "My brother only hit me that one time," I explained. "It wasn't like I was being beaten regularly." Dr. Warner's response was gentle but firm. "Abuse isn't measured by frequency, Kayla. A single act of violence in a context of ongoing emotional manipulation and control is still abuse. And from what you've told me, the emotional abuse was constant." Slowly, painfully, I began to recognize patterns I had never questioned. The golden child and scapegoat dynamic between Tyler and me, the enabler roles my parents had perfected, the invisible rules that had governed our household. Most importantly, I began to understand that none of it had been my fault. 3 months after the final confrontation with my family, I underwent surgery to correct my improperly healed nose. The procedure was painful, requiring the bone to be rebroken and reset, but somehow fitting as a physical manifestation of my emotional healing. Things had to break completely before they could heal properly. The nightmares and panic attacks that had plagued me since my escape gradually subsided. I still flinched at sudden movements or raised voices, but the paralyzing fear began to recede. In its place grew something I had rarely experienced before: a tentative sense of safety. My friendship with Amelia deepened during this time. She had witnessed my family's dysfunction firsthand during the confrontation at my apartment, and understood the magnitude of what I was breaking free from in a way few others could. "I always thought my parents were strict," she confided one evening as we shared takeout in my apartment. "But they never made me afraid. I never had to calculate their moods before speaking." "I'm so sorry you lived that way for so long, Kayla." Jackson became another pillar of my chosen family, his own experience with family estrangement providing a roadmap I could follow. "The first holidays are the hardest," he warned me as Thanksgiving approached. "Even if your family was terrible, there's this cultural expectation that makes you feel like you're doing something wrong by not being with them." He was right. That first Thanksgiving alone felt like a test of my resolve. I declined Amelia's invitation to join her family, not ready to witness functional family dynamics up close. Instead, I spent the day painting in my apartment, ordering Chinese food, and watching old movies. It was quiet, sometimes painfully so, but it was peaceful. No walking on eggshells, no bracing for Tyler's inevitable drunken outburst, no pretending my mother wasn't slurring her words by 4 in the afternoon. By Christmas, I felt strong enough to accept Mrs. Peterson's invitation to join her family's celebration. Watching her grown children interact with her, the easy affection and genuine interest they showed in each other's lives, brought both pain and healing. This was what family could be, what it should be. I hadn't had it growing up, but perhaps someday I could create it. Professionally, the freedom from constant family stress allowed me to flourish. 6 months after leaving home, I was promoted to assistant manager at Horizon Books. My graphic design portfolio, built through evening classes and freelance projects, began attracting attention. I started receiving commissions for logo designs and illustrations, building a reputation for clean, emotionally resonant work. My one-bedroom apartment became a sanctuary, decorated in colors and styles my mother would have deemed too bold or attention-seeking. Bright teal accent walls, artwork that spoke to my soul rather than matching the furniture, plants thriving on every available surface. For the first time, my living space reflected who I truly was, not who I had to pretend to be to avoid criticism. Dating proved more challenging than I had anticipated. My trust had been so fundamentally damaged that I approached every potential relationship with caution bordering on suspicion. The first time a date raised his voice, not even in anger, but in excitement over a sports game on a restaurant TV, I had a panic attack in the bathroom. I wasn't ready, I realized, and that was okay. Healing wouldn't follow a timetable. Instead, I focused on building friendships and rediscovering passions that had been suppressed in my family home. I joined an art collective, started hiking on weekends, took a cooking class. Each new experience, each connection formed on my own terms, helped rebuild the sense of self that years of emotional abuse had eroded. 2 years after my escape, I received an unexpected email from my mother. The subject line was simple: "I'm sorry." The message inside was brief, but showed a self-awareness I had never witnessed from her before. "I've been in AA for 6 months now. Step 9 is making amends to those I've harmed. I know a simple apology cannot undo years of hurt, but I want you to know I recognize my failure to protect you. If you're ever willing to talk, I would be grateful for the chance." I read the email a dozen times, emotions cycling between hope, skepticism, and fear. After discussing it extensively with Dr. Warner, I agreed to meet my mother at a neutral location, a coffee shop with plenty of people around. She looked older than I remembered, the artificial youthfulness she had always maintained through careful makeup and hair dye replaced by a more natural appearance. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred her coffee, but not from alcohol, she assured me. "Withdrawal does permanent damage to your nervous system," she explained. "A small price to pay for sobriety." Our conversation was awkward, halting, but marked by an honesty we had never shared before. She didn't make excuses for her drinking or her enabling of Tyler's behavior. "I failed you," she said simply. "I chose the easier path of supporting your father's favorite instead of protecting my daughter. I don't expect forgiveness, Kayla. I just want you to know that I understand now what I did wrong." 2 weeks later, I received a stiff, formal email from my father. Unlike my mother's heartfelt apology, his message read more like a business communication, acknowledging regrettable actions and expressing a desire to move forward productively. It wasn't much, but from a man who had never admitted fault in his life, it represented significant movement. Tyler's change came more slowly and with greater resistance. Court-mandated anger management classes had forced him to confront some of his behavior, but true accountability remained elusive. His first message to me, sent through my mother, still contained traces of justification. "I know I messed up, but you have to understand how much pressure I was under." I maintained firm boundaries with all of them, agreeing to limited contact on my terms only. Coffee with my mother once a month. Brief, civil email exchanges with my father. No direct contact with Tyler until he could demonstrate genuine change through sustained sobriety and therapy. It wasn't the dramatic reconciliation Hollywood might have scripted, but it was realistic and, more importantly, safe for my continued healing. I no longer needed their approval or acceptance. My life had blossomed without them, proving what I had suspected but never fully believed. I was stronger, more capable, and more worthy of love than they had ever allowed me to believe. Today, at 27, I've built a life that the terrified girl bleeding on her parents' kitchen floor could scarcely have imagined. My graphic design career has taken off, allowing me to leave the bookstore, though I still visit Mrs. Peterson regularly. I've moved to Chicago as planned, my apartment filled with light and art and the comfortable chaos of creativity. I've even found love with Daniel, a kind, steady man whose patience with my lingering trust issues never wavers. "Take all the time you need," he told me early in our relationship. I'm not going anywhere, and remarkably, I've begun to believe him. My relationship with my family remains complicated. My mother, now 3 years sober, has done the most work to repair what was broken, though some fractures will never fully heal. My father makes awkward but genuine efforts to know me as an adult, though he still struggles with seeing past the reflection of his own failures. Tyler and I maintain a careful distance, our interactions limited to family events I occasionally attend. The most meaningful work I do now, beyond my art, is volunteering with a domestic violence support group for young adults from dysfunctional families. Sharing my story with others who lived similar nightmares helps transform my pain into purpose. When a young woman sits across from me, making the same excuses I once made, I can gently hold up a mirror to her experience in a way no one did for me until it was almost too late. The lessons I've learned through this journey run deeper than simple platitudes about resilience or forgiveness. I've learned that family obligation never includes tolerating abuse. That healing isn't linear, with progress often followed by painful setbacks before moving forward again. That building a chosen family of people who truly see and support you is not just possible, but essential for survivors of family trauma. Most importantly, I've learned that the scars, both physical and emotional, don't define us. They remind us of our strength, not our victimhood. The slightly crooked set of my nose, that remains even after corrective surgery, doesn't make me feel shame anymore. It reminds me that I survived, that I had the courage to walk away, and that I'm building a life on my own terms. If you're watching this and my story resonates with your experience, please know you're not alone. The cycle of family abuse thrives in silence and isolation, but it cannot survive exposure to light. Reach out for help, even when every instinct trained by your abusers tells you to stay quiet. Your story matters. Your pain is real. And your future can be different from your past. Thank you for listening to my journey. If this story helped you in any way, please consider subscribing to hear more stories of survival and transformation. Leave a comment about which part of this journey resonated most with you, or share with someone who might need to hear that escape is possible. Remember, the strongest people aren't those who never fall, but those who rise again after being knocked down. You have that strength within you too.